Welcome everyone to Two Intellects Talk About Stuff. Welcome, Chrissy.
Welcome, Bill. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Tonight we're going to be talking about Westworld Episode 4, Dissonance Theory, which I love because I love all kinds of theories. But why don't you tell us what happened in this episode?
Okay, yeah, let me give a little plot summary. A lot happened in this episode. We encountered almost, I think, all of the characters who have been introduced so far, and they went through some pretty significant events. Dolores ends up receiving permission to continue traveling with William and Logan, the two young men who we met in the first episode. So she's left her normal story on the ranch. In one of the early scenes with William and Logan, we find out that Logan's family, who William is marrying, and he's marrying into Logan's family, and Logan's family owns some shares of Westworld and is considering owning more. Yes. And so you start to get a sense of why Logan seems to have a very intimate understanding of Westworld, about how they know what they know about everyone. And so he posits to William that Dolores has been sent to knock him out of his apathy so that he can actually become engaged in the game.
Yeah, and that's not just his opinion. William pushes back and he says, no, this is how it is, right? And he's right.
Right. And Logan says, yeah, they know so much about you. That thought is echoed in the scene between Ford and Cullen, where Ford is clearly on a power trip. He wants to display to Cullen that he will not be stopped. And he sends that message loud and clear. So he's got her in the restaurant, the very restaurant that she went to as a child with her family. He seats her at the very table. And as she's letting this, she's looking around and experiencing the restaurant once again, he freezes everything.
Oh, I love that.
You know, just this moment where he is basically saying to her, I'm a kind of god here. Actually, I think he does say that.
Okay.
So in that scene, that's the one that I want to talk about. I'll talk about it in greater detail later. It's a great scene. We also see the man in black making progress. You know, he is interested in finding the maze, and he is following the clues. So he meets a host with a snake tattoo, and he arranges to have that
Girl
host,
of the river,
yeah, to have her explain what her snake tattoo represents. And
it's just like a video game. He has to like bust out of jail just to get her to explain something, right?
Exactly. Yes, very, very video game-like in this episode. We also see that the host with the snake and the little outlaw that the man in black releases from jail, busts out of jail, that they're all part of what the company calls the floor show, in the spirit of a Vegas casino that will have a floor show that happens every hour, every 2 hours. The world of Westworld has this
mini
show,
massacre every noon.
Yeah, mini massacre as entertainment.
I can't believe how they can afford to repair all those androids. It must be $40,000 a day doesn't begin to cover the number of androids a person can kill.
Yeah, I saw on the back of the box to the Westworld film that in the original film it's $1,000 a day. Talk about inflation.
Wow. I mean, I don't think inflation has gone up 40-fold, so it's just androids are more expensive these days. They still don't exist, but they're more expensive. That's realistic.
And we also, you know, just to wrap up the plot summary, Thandie Newton's character, Maeve.
She's the one I want to talk about.
Yes, she is having her flashbacks. And I'll just hand it over to you because I know you're really interested in that scene.
I'm fascinated by the nature of android consciousness, and that means android memory, because the whole question as posed in the first couple episodes is how can they wipe out the memory they need to wipe out of these people being killed and oppressed and literally having their selves torn out and rewritten. How can they wipe that stuff out and keep all the filigree of how to walk and move and dance and move your eyebrows in convincing ways? So it's like, how can we, it's like the old idea about advertising, you know, I want the part I want, but how do I get rid of the part which doesn't work? And they're finding that problem. So I'm going to go into that scene a little bit. But why don't we talk about yours?
Well, so yes, that scene with Ford flexing his muscles there. Of course, I think the most arresting moment, literally arresting, sorry about the pun, moment is when Ford raises his hand and everything freezes, except for the wine that's coming out of the bottle into Cullen's glass.
Spilling all over the table. Mm-hmm.
And she notices what he's done. It's a great moment, and reminds you of how many effects we haven't seen used in Westworld. That it is a completely created world, and it can be however Ford wants it to be. And that is his main message to Cullen there in that dinner. This world is going to be how I want it to be. And he positions himself as a less crazy version of Arnold. And so Arnold, we are learning a little more about, and Arnold's interest in android consciousness. Clearly, whatever Arnold was up to is very, very important to the ultimate mystery of the show. But whatever dream he had, there is some homage to it in Ford's final narrative. That I'm pretty sure of. Okay. The other extraordinary moment in that scene is when Ford sends that mining machine just to turn up all the earth.
He has the mine. We never know what the mining machine is, but suddenly it's cresting over the hill. And so rather than being like their uranium mine for revenue or something like that, it's now invading Westworld itself, and it's actually invading the place where the employees get to have lunch. That's quite something. But do you believe that the supervision that he outlines to Cullen, he says, oh yes, we know our guests very well, and our employees too. Do you suspect that they're applying the same kind of micro-scale emotional analysis to their own employees as they do to their guests?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's in that scene where he tells Cullen to be careful of Bernard. And we've seen Bernard read Cullen very well in earlier episodes. He knows body language. That's how he's able to program androids that are so lifelike. And so he uses it whenever he can, it seems.
Yeah. His understanding of androids, his and Anthony Hopkins, are the real drivers. Arnold is a presence we hear about, but these are the ones who know the most what it is like to create a lifelike human, which in some sense means understanding human frailties too. Mm-hmm. And the one that clearly Bernard is addressing when he's interviewing Dolores about memories and things like that, but he must know this stuff anyway. And Maeve is the perfect illustration of it in this episode, because at first we see her, or are reminded of her dying and being confronted by this phantasm figure of a bunny suit guy right before she actually dies. And she comes back and she gets reminded of this thing and that. And when she sees that little Kachinka-style doll on the ground, dropped by a girl in the parade, and picks it up and looks at it and recognizes it and runs to the girl and asks her, and the girl just grabs it off, and some soldier says, it's just their religion. Well, that's a stock answer, but she knows better. She's seen that thing before. And recognition is a much more powerful form of memory than recreation. Even though they might be able, the Delos Corporation might be able to wipe out the memory that, oh yes, I remember back when the bunny suit guy killed me, or something. it's much harder to wipe out the recognition of something you've seen before. And all of us as humans know that. We get reminded of things we never thought of remembering. That's kind of why it's called reminded. And so that's true of android brains too. They get triggered. And the programming is that important events make you trigger more than unimportant events. And so, of course, an android is going to remember when it dies. Probably the most important thing in its life. And if it remembers that image, then that image will not be wiped when Delos comes and says, thou shalt forget your character. Remember all your traits, but forget your character. That's the flaw. And so when she comes, and this is coming into her actual consciousness, the episodic part of her mind who keeps track of things like that and is able to notice when her own memory is failing. It's sort of weird to have your mind telling you when your mind is failing, but we all know that, and now so does she. She draws a picture of it, convinced that somehow storing this physical evidence of her memory will help her get around the problem of having it wiped all the time. And as she puts it under the floorboards, she sees a stack of papers, and every one has the same image of the bunny suit guy, the same chilling image of this spectral figure, which is, between worlds. And so when she recognizes the physical validation, in fact, of her own memory weaknesses, she enters a kind of self-awareness of her world that most humans barely ever get about ours. And so this was a wonderful way for them to illustrate the conflict in making an android memory which is selectively forgetting, which is kind of like all kinds of oppressed peoples who are being told in one way or another to forget what happened to them or their ancestors and just proceed as if everything's all right.
What really struck me about that whole episode with Maeve is when she asks the villain from the floor show about the men that she's having visions of, and he has a whole stock response. The fact that his programming, that Delos Corporation has anticipated that droids would have memories of the people who put them back together again when they're wearing their suits.
Oh, so this is back when they're at the safe at the very end.
Yes.
Okay, right. And he says, oh yes, it's a dream walk or something.
Yes, and that you're very lucky. It's lucky to be able to see them.
Mm-hmm. As if that's the end of the story.
As if that's the end of the story. And you get the sense that perhaps her character, her character and that character, the villain guy, are clearly in some sort of semi-scripted interaction. Like that's part of what's supposed to happen during the floor show. He comes in and gets something from the safe that's needed so that whatever narrative he's a part of can keep going. And so my question is, has she been remembering these guys from day one?
Well, we only saw a dozen pictures, but we've seen her a bunch of times and she only drew one picture on that time. Maybe she's drawn a picture a week forever. Who knows?
Who knows?
Maybe they removed some of them and she actually drew 100 pictures we never saw.
Exactly. Who knows? But this leads to my final point. What I'm really interested in watching unfold are what I really want to learn more about is how deliberate the strategy it was on the part of Delos for the robots to come into consciousness. I think that it was deliberate and that they needed that to happen over time in order for the final game, the game that will be most lucrative for the company, to be played.
Interesting. I'm going to hold my vote on that because on the one hand, it does make sense that an evil corporation would foresee everything and plan out the entire 5 years worth of Westworld series all at the very beginning. But on the other hand, I've been around software development so much to know that most middle managers and even most senior managers can't see past 6 months and never understand the deep consequences of the little decisions they make. For example, whether to wipe an android's memory or not. I don't really believe a real business would have foreseen this coming, but I guess we'll see what HBO thinks.
Yeah, we'll see what HBO thinks. Now, just to be clear, though, I'm not saying that they anticipated all 5 seasons of Westworld. I'm just saying that this very idea that the androids would have some sort of emergent consciousness that would allow them to begin to ask questions about their nature.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I think was deliberately just a part of the plan, and it was foreseen. And there are several fail-safes there, and the question is, will they continue to work?
Right. You're right. There's a lot of evidence that there's more about the nature of android consciousness than the viewers have been shown. I just, if an actual corporation could actually think that clearly, that would be a miracle, man. I'd trust my life to them.
The beauty of fiction.
The beauty of fiction. Let's go to Westworld next time.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Good night.